Ilia Topuria just 50-45 Josh Emmett and proved that he can hang in there for 5 rounds against a tough veteran. And although I picked Ilia Topuria to knock Josh Emmett out or to submit him early on, what impressed me the most is that he was the one that was composed, calm, cool, and collected earlier on. And one thing that I said going into this fight is that a lot of people were writing off Ilia Topuria's fight IQ and his defense because he was eating big shots against Bryce Mitchell, because he was walking down Mitchell without a care in the world of what could be coming back in his direction. And I just didn't think that he would fight Josh Emmett the same way. And he proved me right because he had a lot of respect for the power of Emmett early. And he just made Emmett swing and miss big in the first round. And Emmett kind of like gassed himself out a little bit. He took the wind out of Emmett's sails early, started to land investment shots, got the jab going, got the low kick going. And in the later rounds, Emmett was just a shell of himself. You know what I mean? A swollen eye, bleeding all over the place. And Ilia Topuria just dominated him in the later rounds. Had a 10-8 in the 4th round where he dropped him. Let me just look at the total stats. But overall, I had it a clean sweep. The judges, one of them scored it a 50-42, which is insane. But overall, Ilia Topuria landed 152 strikes to 87 of Josh Emmett. And ultimately, what made the difference is that Josh Emmett's just not that great. He doesn't have a deep tool bag. And although Ilia Topuria doesn't have that much in his arsenal, everything that he does, it works. And he sets it up beautifully. Whereas Josh Emmett just kind of throws naked strikes. He throws naked attacks. And Ilia Topuria was countering him all night long. Now, one thing I do have to say is I have to give Emmett credit because he was tough as nails in this fight. And I said that he was going to mentally break, and that never happened. Because even after the 4th round, which was Emmett's roughest round, he got dropped twice badly and almost finished. He came out in the 5th, eager to get a finish. So he showed his toughness, but it just wasn't enough because, again, I've always said this about Emmett. He's just not that good. He's very predictable, and I think that's what was able to get Ilia Topuria over the hill on this one is Emmett's predictability. He only had to worry about a couple of those weapons, and that's the right hand and the big hooks, and that's it. Whereas Ilia Topuria proved to have some other tools in his box, and that's the low kick, and that's the jab. This is the first time his jab has really looked that solid. We know he's had really good body shots and a clean right hand and beautiful hooks, but he impressed me with his ability to stick and move. That being said, I did expect him to finish Josh Emmett, and it was a great performance, 50-44. Great win from him. And he proved that he's not like everyone else in the division. He has really solidified himself, in my opinion, as a guy that's top 5 level. You know what I mean? He's right there with a guy like Arnold Allen. I think he's a little bit more impressive than Arnold Allen. And I think he's better than a Movsar Evloev. That being said, I don't think this guy is going to beat Max Holloway. And I sure as fuck don't think he's going to beat Volkanovski. And the reason is because I just talked about the tool bag of Emmett, how he's just lacking. He doesn't have the variety, and he's a little bit predictable. Even though Ilia Topuria is a smart fighter, and he is more defensively sound than a lot of people were saying going into this fight. The same people that were saying that, he got hit by Bryce Mitchell. Well, he's going to get knocked out by Emmett if he's fighting him the same way. I'm telling you right now, he is a little bit too plotty and a little bit too predictable for a guy like Volkanovski. And in order to beat Volk, you have to have that freakish speed. You know what I mean? And to be fair, we're talking about the power of Ilia Topuria. He hit Emmett with big shots, and he didn't put him out. He didn't finish him. There aren't many knockouts at the top of the featherweight division. It's not like Emmett is Mr. Granite Chin. So as far as him being like a serious test for Volkanovski, if they were to fight this year, no. I am confident that Volkanovski would dance around this guy and show levels and just outpoint him. I don't think Volk would finish Topuria. Topuria proved that he's really tough. I even said going into this that his chin is a little bit underrated. A lot of people thought that because he got dropped by Jai Herbert, ever since then he's had a sus chin. And because he got hit with a head kick by Bryce Mitchell, all of a sudden, he's going to get KO'd by anyone that punches him with a lot of power. Volk is not going to finish this guy, but I think Volk's going to beat him and outclass him if they fight. And he did take some damage. Emmett was in there with him for the first few rounds. There were a couple of close ones. The first round was close, even though I gave that to Ilia Topuria. The second round was also close. And the third round, somewhat close. I could swear, I feel like Ilia dropped Emmett in a round outside of the 4th as well. And I don't know why that's not on the stats, but either way, I want to know in the comments who you guys would pick if Ilia Topuria and Volkanovski were to fight at the end of the year. Let's say Volk gets past Yair Rodriguez, and if he does that, he'll probably look impressive. I just think Ilia is a little green. He's amazing. He's solid. But let's not act like Josh Emmett is like a top 5 level fighter in this division. I've said this time and time again, and I'm not going to backtrack now. Josh Emmett might not even be good enough to be a top 8 fighter in this division. There are 8 guys that I could name that are better than him. But because Emmett has pretty good grappling, for Ilia Topuria to go out there and out-grapple him as well, to go out there and outlast him for 5 rounds, is impressive. And the most important takeaway is he showed composure and he showed good fight IQ. And for a 26-year-old to do that, that's still getting better, that's a great sign. And although I don't think he's going to take out Volkanovski if they fight, I think he's going to be a future champion. He's got higher output than a guy like Arnold Allen. If you were to fight a guy like Yair Rodriguez, I think he'd be able to take him down. Remember, you're not just going to take Emmett down and ragdoll him and wrap up a submission. The guy is still pretty decent down there. He's got good wrestling. I think the reason why Yair submitted Emmett is because Emmett just kind of wilted. But again, we're talking about a future Volkanovski fight. Look at what Yair did to Emmett. Yair made Emmett look like he's an amateur and he shouldn't even be in there, and he completely broke him within 2 rounds and wrapped up a submission. The only reason I'm being a little bit critical of Ilia Topuria here, guys, is just because I can already see people sounding the alarms that this guy's going to go out here and destroy Volkanovski, and I just don't see it. I don't think his movement is where it needs to be. You know, he has better footwork than Josh Emmett. Great, he has better boxing than Josh Emmett. It's Josh Emmett, and I picked him to win, and I'm happy that he got the job done. And if you're going to go to a decision with Josh Emmett, that's how you should do it. But we can use the eye test and say to ourselves that this guy's still only 26 years old, still improving. But as far as his footwork goes, as far as his tool bag, the variety of attacks that he has, of course, he's a pretty good grappler. I think Volk would shut him down there. I just don't think he's got a deep enough tool bag as it is right now to take out Volk. But we also have to talk about some of the other fights. I thought this card was pretty damn good. The only 2 fights that absolutely sucked was the Neil Magny fight and the Phil Rowe fight. I think the UFC, honestly, like, Phil Rowe might be one of the worst decision makers in the game. Horrible fight IQ. Apparently, when he was getting into the cage, I heard the commentary mention that at the fighter meetings, Phil Rowe was talking about how he had watched a lot of Magny tape and he was super prepared. And then the first thing he does is he gets into a clinch with Neil Magny, and that was his prerogative. Let's clinch with Neil Magny. This is exactly where Magny wins every single one of his fights. He loves a good old clinch fest, but this is my plan. Terrible idea, and Phil Rowe just proved that he's an absolute fraud, and you need a guy like Neil Magny to weed out those kinds of guys. So I thought Phil Rowe would have a good chance to finish Magny on the feet because he could match him at range, he could match him with the reach, and he's got more power, he's faster, he's younger, but he wanted to clinch with Magny, and that's what happens. Brendan Allen submitting Bruno Silva and rocking him, dropping him badly. I was saying going into this fight that I wanted Bruno Silva to win because he's got such an entertaining style. But man, am I happy that Brendan Allen got the job done. And I know how dangerous he is on the ground. He proved that again. He's a finisher. He's only 27 years old. He called out Jared Cannonier, which was a little bit weird. Pump the brakes. You're not going to get that fight anytime soon. But either way, for him to drop Bruno Silva and kind of outclass him a bit on the feet, and just show to have a better fight IQ and to be the more composed man. Bruno Silva was just gunning for the finish, way too eager for an early finish. He's not as tough as he was before the Pereira fight. I feel like Pereira really stole that chin from Bruno Silva. But for Brendan Allen to go out there and actually showcase some serious power, it impressed me. It really did impress me, and I'd like to see him fight a guy like a Mavov next, or maybe someone like a Roman Dolidze. I think he's going to be ranked number 9 now. He's calling out Cannonier for a number 1 contenders fight. I think it's a bit of a wasted call out just because, again, you're not going to get that fight. You may as well make a call out that will actually lead to something and that could be used as part of a build-up to a realistic fight. But either way, I'm really liking Brendan Allen's style, and I'm a bigger fan of him now than I ever was before. David Onama, another brilliant finish on this card. I think he lost the first round to Gabriel Santos. Both guys seemed pretty evenly matched, but David Onama, apparently he was training at altitude getting ready for this fight. His cardio looked solid. Both guys, as I said, Gabriel Santos seemed to be getting the better of Onama early on, but that 3-piece combo that Onama landed, starting with the uppercut, was vicious. That was definitely the finish of the night. I still can't believe that Ilia Topuria and Josh Emmett did not lead to a KO. That is just crazy to me. And then some other good fights. Cedricus Dumas, Cody Brundage. The UFC needs to cut Cody Brundage, one of the worst fighters in the UFC by far. Apparently his game plan was to not throw up a guillotine at all because that was the mistake he made in his last fight. He pulled like 5 guillotines. So horrible fight IQ. And DC was out here glazing Cedricus Dumas like he's the next GSP, the next John Jones, even though it was just Cody Brundage looking terrible. But Cedricus Dumas looked improved nonetheless, even though I felt like the commentary was glazing him a little bit too heavily. Sometimes it's just the case that one guy is just terrible, and Cedricus looked okay. That was a good one. And then the last guy that I need to give a shout out to, Joshua Van, his win over Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Listen, I have to say this just to preface my next few statements. Zhalgas Zhumagulov has lost 6 fights in the UFC, and he has 1 win in the UFC. So he's 1-6 in the UFC. That's rough. It's hard to say that this is such a good win for Joshua Van, but he's 21 years old. And when I think of Joshua Van in the flyweight division, I have to say, the flyweight division has so many solid young prospects. Tatsuro Taira, Muhammad Makayev, but I haven't seen a guy look this solid on the feet as a 21-year-old prospect. Another guy that's pretty good, that's in the bantamweight division that's really young, is Cameron Simon. He looks pretty decent on the feet, very well-rounded. He's a South African guy that trains with Dricus du Plessis. So for Joshua Van to go out there and just kind of outclass and out-volume and out-damage an older veteran that's still pretty solid on the feet for 3 rounds to show you have a good pace too is incredibly impressive, and I can't wait for his next fight. What did you guys think of his performance, and how do you rank him against the other prospects in the UFC? I honestly think this guy has got a bit of a brighter future than Muhammad Makayev. Muhammad Makayev doesn't exactly strike me as the smartest fighter. He's a little bit too crazy, a little bit too wild. What is up, guys? It's Lucas Tracy MMA here, and I want to let you guys know that I have something for you, and that's a real food cookbook. Because if you're walking around looking like Chris Dawkins, you got to get that weight off. I don't know if you think you're DC or something, but most people usually don't perform at their best when they're walking around with 30% body fat. So if you're trying to lean out and you still want to eat good, tasty comfort foods, well, you could check out my Real Food Cookbook, because I've made it a purpose to have good, tasty foods that you can still eat just without all the processed bullshit, without all the processed ingredients like soy and seed oils. So guys, check out the Real Food Cookbook. Use code MMA for 30% off. The link is in my description. Don't forget that discount.